As I lay in the cold, dimly lit hospital room, surrounded by the steady beeping of machines, I felt an overwhelming numbness. It wasn't the pain from my weak heart that weighed on me the most, nor the looming shadow of surgery that threatened to be my last chance. It was something far colder, something that gnawed at me from within. I had spent my life loving someone who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone, a means to an end. And now, on the edge of life and death, the truth of that realization hurt far more than my failing body ever could. The door to my room was slightly ajar, and voices drifted in from the hallway. I recognized my husband's voice immediately. He was speaking softly, but there was an edge to his tone, something impatient and distant, something I had never noticed before. I strained to hear, catching fragments of the conversation. "How soon can we get her out of the picture?" he murmured to someone, his words cutting through me like a blade. "The longer this takes, the harder it'll be for you to recover." A chill crept over me as the pieces began to fall into place. He wasn't here out of love or concern for me. He wasn't by my side as I struggled to cling to life. No, he was here for her. Someone else. Someone who, to him, deserved my heart more than I ever did. My world crumbled in that instant, the years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice unraveling into a cold, hollow emptiness. The realization settled in like a weight on my chest. He was planning to give my heart to someone else. I was nothing more than a convenient vessel, a resource he could use until it was drained, ready to be cast aside when my time ran out. In that moment, my mind drifted back to happier times, to a life that now felt like a distant dream. I could see myself in our cozy living room, a place I had filled with warmth and love, waiting eagerly for him to come home from work. I would spend hours preparing his favorite meals, hoping that tonight would be the night he'd put down his phone, look at me, and see the woman who loved him more than anything. But every time, he would brush me off, muttering something about work, barely sparing me a second glance. I'd wait up for him, stay by his side through every struggle, thinking that one day he'd notice, that he'd finally appreciate the quiet support I had given him. But he never did. I had been blind, giving everything I had to a man who saw me as little more than an afterthought. The realization burned, each memory twisting the knife deeper, but with it came a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Yes, but also a fierce determination. They wanted my heart, but they didn't know it was still beating. They thought I was too weak to fight, that I'd simply slip away, leaving them to their plans. But they were wrong. As the reality of my husband's betrayal sank in, a quiet fury began to build within me, a strength I didn't know I still possessed. I had been passive for too long, silencing my own needs, living in the shadows of someone else's life. But that was about to change. If they thought I would lie down and let them take my life, my very heart, for their own twisted purposes, they were mistaken. That night, as I lay alone in the dim hospital room, memories surfaced, haunting and unrelenting. I remembered the small signs I'd ignored over the years. The late nights he claimed were work emergencies, the evasive answers, the unexplained absences. I had convinced myself they meant nothing, chalking it up to stress, to the demands of his career. I had told myself he was a good man, that he was just under pressure, that it would pass. But I had been wrong. Those nights, those excuses were never about me. They were the cracks in a facade I had refused to see. Every sacrifice I had made, every time I'd put him first, replayed in my mind like a bitter reminder of my own blindness. The quiet meals I ate alone, waiting for him to come home. The times I'd dropped everything to support him, only to be met with indifference. The years I had given, trying to be the perfect partner, believing that my love would eventually be reciprocated. I had allowed myself to disappear, piece by piece, thinking it was for a worthy cause. For us, for our future. But now I could see the truth. I had never been his priority. I had only been a convenience. The next morning he walked into my room, carrying that same practiced smile, his tone gentle and measured, as though he could erase everything with a few soft-spoken words. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away, looking at him with a newfound clarity. For the first time, I saw him without the rose-colored glasses of love. I saw the man behind the mask, someone who wore kindness like armor, hiding his true intentions behind an illusion of care. I knew I had to protect myself now, in ways I never had before. I would no longer be the quiet, compliant woman he had grown comfortable with. I wouldn't be the silent figure who waited, who hoped, who sacrificed. I had been pushed to the edge, and there was only one direction left to go: forward. I decided then and there that I would reclaim my life. I would not be their sacrificial lamb, their quiet casualty. It was time to take back what was mine, piece by piece. After that morning, something shifted in me. I felt an unshakable resolve, a determination to reclaim the life I had let slip away in the name of love and loyalty. If they thought I would remain quiet, that I'd simply disappear to make way for their plans, they had gravely underestimated me. I spent the next few days watching and listening, gathering fragments of information, piecing together the lies I had been fed. Each day I felt myself growing stronger, my spirit rising from the ashes of betrayal. In the days that followed, I noticed the little ways my husband tried to keep up his charade, his gentle smiles and hollow reassurances. "You'll be all right," he'd say, patting my hand with a feigned tenderness that only deepened my resentment. I'd nod, feigning compliance, letting him believe I was still the same naive woman he'd controlled all these years. But inside, I was planning. My mind raced with thoughts of how to dismantle his carefully constructed world, the life he had built on lies and manipulation. Then, one evening, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him speaking on the phone just outside my hospital door. "Yes, we're almost there. I just need a little more time," he whispered, his voice filled with impatience. "She won't be an issue much longer." The cold certainty in his words made my blood run cold, but it also solidified my determination. He had to pay for what he'd done, for the years he had stolen from me, and for the life he had tried to take. I decided to make a few calls of my own, reaching out to old friends and allies I had distanced myself from over the years at his insistence. I wasn't the helpless woman he thought he'd left behind. I had a network, connections that could help me reclaim my life and my dignity. One by one I reached out, quietly setting the pieces into place. Each conversation was a reminder of who I was before he had made me feel small. That a shadow of my former self. I was starting to remember my own strength. A few days later, I felt strong enough to sit down with him for a conversation. He looked surprised, a flicker of unease crossing his face as I invited him to sit beside me. I kept my expression calm, my voice even. "I want to talk about the future," I said, watching his reaction carefully. He seemed relieved, perhaps assuming I had finally accepted his plans. But as I spoke, I saw his face pale, his confidence falter. I let him believe for a moment that he still held the upper hand. And then, just when he thought he had me, I let him see the truth in my eyes. I was no longer the woman he had controlled. I was done being a pawn in his game. After that morning, something shifted in me. I felt an unshakable resolve, a determination to reclaim the life I had let slip away in the name of love and loyalty. If they thought I would remain quiet, that I'd simply disappear to make way for their plans, they had gravely underestimated me. I spent the next few days watching and listening, gathering fragments of information, piecing together the lies I had been fed. Each day I felt myself growing stronger, my spirit rising from the ashes of betrayal. In the days that followed, I noticed the little ways my husband tried to keep up his charade, his gentle smiles and hollow reassurances. "You'll be all right," he'd say, patting my hand with a feigned tenderness that only deepened my resentment. I'd nod, feigning compliance, letting him believe I was still the same naive woman he'd controlled all these years. But inside, I was planning. My mind raced with thoughts of how to dismantle his carefully constructed world, the life he had built on lies and manipulation. Then, one evening when he thought I was asleep, I heard him speaking on the phone just outside my hospital door. "Yes, we're almost there. I just need a little more time," he whispered, his voice filled with impatience. "She won't be an issue much longer." The cold certainty in his words made my blood run cold, but it also solidified my determination. He had to pay for what he'd done, for the years he had stolen from me, and for the life he had tried to take. I decided to make a few calls of my own, reaching out to old friends and allies I had distanced myself from over the years at his insistence. I wasn't the helpless woman he thought he'd left behind. I had a network, connections that could help me reclaim my life and my dignity. One by one, I reached out, quietly setting the pieces into place. Each conversation was a reminder of who I was before he had made me feel small, a shadow of my former self. I was starting to remember my own strength. A few days later, I felt strong enough to sit down with him for a conversation. He looked surprised, a flicker of unease crossing his face as I invited him to sit beside me. I kept my expression calm, my voice even. "I want to talk about the future," I said, watching his reaction carefully. He seemed relieved, perhaps assuming I had finally accepted his plans. But as I spoke, I saw his face pale, his confidence falter. I let him believe for a moment that he still held the upper hand. And then, just when he thought he had me, I let him see the truth in my eyes. I was no longer the woman he had controlled. I was done being a pawn in his game. I watched as my husband's carefully constructed composure began to crumble. He had always been so certain, so sure that I would remain in the role he had written for me. But now, with the truth laid bare between us, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. It was a look I had never seen before, and it filled me with a quiet satisfaction. For the first time, he was the one who felt vulnerable. I kept my voice calm and steady, masking the storm of emotions raging within me. "I know everything," I said, each word a blade slicing through his deception. "I know about your plans, about her, and about what you were willing to sacrifice to get what you wanted." He opened his mouth to protest, to spin some feeble excuse, but I raised a hand to silence him. "Don't insult me with more lies," I continued, my gaze unflinching. "I spent too long believing them. Not anymore." He sat there, stunned into silence, the facade of confidence slipping as the weight of his betrayal settled between us. I could see him scrambling, searching for some way to regain control, but I wasn't going to give him the chance. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you ever think I'd just let you take everything? That I'd lie here and wait for you to erase me from my own life?" He swallowed, his eyes darting around the room, as if looking for an escape. But there was none. I had spent years feeling trapped, cornered by his lies and manipulation. Now the tables had turned. "You wanted me gone?" I said softly, my voice laced with a new, quiet strength. "Well, I'm here, and I'm not leaving." With those words, I felt a surge of power, a release from the years of silence and suppression. I had reclaimed my voice, my strength, and my sense of self. I could see the panic in his eyes, the dawning realization that his plan had unraveled and that he was no longer in control. The tables had turned, and he was finally the one facing the consequences of his actions. I rose from my bed, feeling a new energy course through me, each step a reclaiming of the life I had almost lost. "I'll be leaving the hospital soon," I said with finality, "but I won't be going anywhere quietly. You should remember that." And with that, I walked away, leaving him in stunned silence, knowing that he had lost the power he had once held over me. The days that followed were a whirlwind of quiet but deliberate action. I had wasted too many years in his shadow, letting him control my life and dim my spirit. Now, with newfound clarity, I started piecing together everything he had tried to take from me, every sacrifice I had made under the illusion of love and loyalty. It was time to take back what was mine. I began by reaching out to my old friends and allies, the people I had distanced myself from at his insistence. They had seen glimpses of the cracks in our relationship over the years, yet they had respected my silence, waiting for me to see the truth for myself. Now, as I reconnected with them, I felt a surge of strength, as though I was reclaiming parts of myself that had been lost in the quiet years of suppression. I learned more about my husband's deceit through careful investigation. The financial betrayals, the manipulation, the endless lies he had fed me, all were laid bare. He had built his life using my resources, my sacrifices, all the while keeping his true intentions hidden behind a mask of affection. I had given him everything, and he had taken it without a second thought, like it was his right. But now I held all the cards. I had the truth, and I was ready to wield it. One afternoon I summoned him to meet me. We sat across from each other, and I laid out the evidence I had gathered, piece by piece, watching as his face shifted from confidence to horror. His usual smug expression crumbled under the weight of his own lies. "You built everything you have on my back," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You took my love, my money, my life, And for what? So you could discard me when I was no longer useful. He stammered, trying to defend himself, to rewrite history, to turn himself into the victim. But I had no patience left for his excuses. I saw through every attempt he made to twist the truth, every desperate plea for forgiveness. He realized, as I did, that there was no path back to what we once had. That life was gone, buried under layers of deceit. "I'm done being the woman you controlled," I told him, my words final and unwavering. "You don't get to rewrite this story. Not anymore." He sat there, defeated, as the reality sank in. He had lost everything. And with each moment that passed, I felt myself growing stronger, my spirit unburdened by the weight of his lies. That was the last time I saw him. I walked away with a sense of closure, a certainty that I had finally freed myself from his grip. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I realized I was no longer that quiet, compliant woman he had kept in the shadows. I was whole again, ready to rebuild my life, no longer bound by the chains he had once wrapped around me. The future was mine now, open and vast, waiting for me to step into it with newfound strength and purpose. With my husband finally out of my life, I felt the freedom I had been denied for so long. It was like breathing fresh air after years in a stifling room. But I knew that moving forward would require more than just severing ties with him. I had to rebuild myself, to rediscover the woman I had buried under layers of sacrifice and submission. It was time to become whole again, on my own terms. I started with small steps, reclaiming the little things he had taken from me. I redecorated the spaces we had shared, filling them with colors and comforts that felt like me, not us. I found joy in the smallest details, in the art and books I'd once loved but had put aside to make room for his interests. It was a slow, careful process of reawakening, of finding pieces of myself that had been lost in the years of living for someone else. I also reconnected with old passions and dreams I had let slip away. Music, painting, exploring the world beyond the narrow limits he had set for me. I joined a local art class, where I found solace in colors and textures, letting my emotions flow onto the canvas. I poured my heartbreak and anger into every brushstroke, each piece a testament to my journey of rediscovery. The friends I made there were a source of inspiration, people who saw me for who I was and encouraged me to keep pushing forward. One evening, as I was working on a painting, my phone lit up with a notification. It was a message from a mutual friend, someone who had witnessed the unraveling of my marriage from a distance. "He's struggling," they wrote. "He's lost most of his clients, and people are starting to find out the truth about him." I read the words without emotion, realizing that the anger and resentment that had once consumed me had started to fade. His downfall was no longer my concern. My focus was on my own growth, my own happiness. The days turned into weeks, and with each one, I felt myself becoming stronger, more grounded. I built a new circle of friends who uplifted me, who reminded me of the strength I had found within myself. They encouraged me to pursue new opportunities, to travel, to embrace the world with open arms. And I did. I took trips to places I had always dreamed of visiting, finding beauty and inspiration in each new experience. Months later, I stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast ocean, feeling the wind in my hair and the sun on my face. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of the waves fill my mind, washing away the remnants of my past. I realized then that I was finally free. Free of the man who had betrayed me, free of the bitterness that had once held me back. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, stronger and more resilient than ever. As I looked out over the endless horizon, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet confidence that I hadn't known before. The past no longer had a hold on me. My life, my choices, and my happiness were mine now. The woman who had once sacrificed everything for someone else was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned the value of self-worth, of resilience, of freedom. And as I took a deep breath, I knew that my journey was just beginning, a journey that was all my own, unburdened by the shadows of the past. In the months that followed, I continued to embrace my new life, finding joy in the freedom that once seemed unimaginable. Each day felt like a step toward reclaiming my sense of self, a journey of healing and discovery that grew more fulfilling with time. I poured my energy into my passions, filling my days with things that brought me true happiness. My work, my art, my friendships, everything felt more vibrant, more real. One day, I received an unexpected message from an old colleague who knew about my journey and the painful past I'd left behind. They reached out to share an opportunity, a project that would require creativity, resilience, and leadership. It was the kind of challenge that would have intimidated me before, but now it felt like a calling. With a deep breath, I accepted, stepping confidently into a role that demanded every ounce of the strength and wisdom I had gained. The work was hard, demanding, and often exhausting, but I found purpose in it. Each accomplishment, each milestone, reminded me of how far I had come. I was no longer defined by my past or by the people who had tried to diminish me. I was building a legacy of my own, a life that reflected my dreams and my resilience. And with each passing day, the scars of betrayal faded, replaced by a quiet pride in what I was creating. I also began to share my story in subtle ways, not out of bitterness, but as a testament to the strength of survival and rebirth. People would often ask where I found my drive, my courage, and I would tell them, in the simplest words, that I had learned to value myself above all else. I had learned that no one, no matter how close, had the right to take my spirit, my dreams, or my heart. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling day, I found myself alone, sitting by a fireplace, reflecting on everything that had brought me to this moment. I realized that I was no longer haunted by anger or resentment. The pain had transformed into wisdom, the wounds into a foundation that held me steady. I had become someone I respected, someone I could rely on. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with heartache and trials, but as I sat there, feeling the warmth of the fire and the peace within my own heart, I knew it had been worth every moment. I had reclaimed my life, my happiness, and my freedom, and in doing so, I had created a future that was all my own. For the first time, I felt truly whole. The past was behind me, its shadows finally faded, and ahead lay a life filled with endless possibilities. I had overcome, I had rebuilt, and I was ready for whatever came next. My journey was no longer one of survival. It was a journey of living fully, freely, and unapologetically as the person I had always been meant to be. As time passed, my life continued to flourish, filled with the joy and peace that I had once thought impossible. I moved forward with purpose, building a world that was entirely mine, rooted in the strength and resilience I had fought to reclaim. Each day brought new experiences, new connections, and new opportunities that I welcomed with open arms. The shadows of my past felt like a distant memory, and I found myself more grounded and at ease with who I had become. One day, as I was working on a community art project that I had organized, a woman approached me, her face unfamiliar but kind. She introduced herself and mentioned that she had heard about my story through mutual friends. "I hope you don't mind," she began, "but I wanted to thank you. Your courage inspired me to leave a toxic relationship of my own." Her words caught me off guard, but in the best way possible. It was a reminder of how far I had come, how the pain I had endured had not only strengthened me, but had created a ripple effect, touching others who needed hope. As we spoke, I realized that sharing my journey was more than just a form of closure. It was a way to empower others, to show them that they, too, could rise from the ashes of betrayal and rebuild their lives with renewed strength. The woman's gratitude reminded me of the importance of resilience, of not allowing anyone to take away the core of who we are. And in that moment, I understood that my story could be a light for those who felt trapped in darkness. A testament to the power of self-love and the freedom that comes from reclaiming one's life. I began speaking more openly about my journey, not as a tale of sorrow, but as a story of triumph. I attended gatherings and workshops, sharing insights into resilience, self-worth, and the courage to let go of relationships that do not serve us. Each time I shared, I felt a piece of my old self slipping further into the past, replaced by a new, unshakable confidence. One evening, after a particularly heartfelt talk, I found myself alone by the shore, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. The beauty of it all felt symbolic, a reflection of the journey I had taken. I realized that I had finally found closure, not only with my past, but with the part of myself that had once yearned for validation from others. I no longer needed anyone else's approval or affection to feel whole. I was complete on my own, grounded in the person I had become. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, I took a deep breath, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, all of it had been part of my path to freedom and self-discovery. And now, as I stood there, alone yet utterly content, I knew that I was ready to embrace whatever came next. My life was my own, and for the first time, I felt truly at peace, knowing that I had the strength to face anything the future held. With a final glance at the fading light, I turned and walked away, my heart full of hope and my spirit unbreakable, ready to step into the boundless possibilities of the life that lay ahead. In the years that followed, my life transformed in ways I'd never dreamed possible. Every challenge, every step forward, felt like a confirmation of the journey I'd taken to get here. I continued to work on projects that fueled my passion and brought purpose to my life, helping others discover their own strength through creative expression. My story had become more than just my past. It had become a testament to resilience and a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to reclaim our lives. I surrounded myself with people who saw me, truly saw me, for who I was, rather than what I could offer them. These friendships were built on trust and authenticity, and they enriched my life in ways I hadn't realized were possible. Together, we traveled, shared laughter, and created memories that filled the empty spaces once occupied by pain and betrayal. My life was now a tapestry woven with love, friendship, and experiences that made my soul feel alive. One day, while preparing for an exhibition of my artwork, I glanced at the pieces I had created over the years. Each canvas was like a chapter of my story, capturing moments of heartache, healing, and transformation. They represented my journey, my evolution from someone who had once been lost in another's shadow to a woman who had found light within herself. As I walked through the gallery, I felt a surge of pride, not just in my art, but in the person I had become. The exhibition was a success, drawing visitors who connected with my story in profound ways. Many shared their own experiences of loss and rediscovery, expressing how my art had touched them, how it had given them hope in their own struggles. I realized then that my journey had come full circle. I had once been the one searching for a way out of darkness, and now, through my art and my story, I was helping others find their own way to the light. Amidst the congratulations and the warmth of new friends, I felt a deep sense of peace. My life was no longer defined by the pain of the past, but by the strength and joy I had created. The betrayal that had once shattered me had become the foundation upon which I had built a new, unbreakable life. I no longer looked back with regret or anger. Instead, I saw each chapter as a necessary part of the journey that had led me here. As the night wound down and I stood in the quiet of the gallery, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the freedom I had fought so hard to achieve, for the life I had reclaimed, and for the person I had finally become. I knew that no matter what the future held, I would face it with courage and grace, for I had learned the most valuable lesson of all. My worth, my happiness, and my peace were mine alone to hold. With a quiet smile, I left the gallery, stepping out into the night with my heart full, my spirit unbreakable, and my path illuminated by the strength I had discovered within. The journey had been long and arduous, but as I walked forward, I knew without a doubt that I was ready to embrace the boundless possibilities of the life that lay ahead, forever free and unafraid. In the quiet moments that followed, as my life continued to unfold with newfound purpose and joy, I often found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The journey that began in pain and betrayal had transformed into a life of peace, fulfillment, and strength. I had created a world that was entirely my own, a life no longer tethered to the ghosts of my past, but instead fueled by the promise of everything I had yet to experience. One morning, as I walked through a nearby park with the sun rising over the horizon, a sense of serenity washed over me. I paused to watch the morning light filter through the trees, casting a warm glow over everything it touched. I realized that, in many ways, I was like this sunrise, a symbol of rebirth, of hope, and of new beginnings. My life was no longer defined by what had been taken from me, but by what I had reclaimed and rebuilt. The pain that once haunted me had faded, replaced by a strength that was deeply rooted in self-worth and resilience. As I continued walking, I thought about the people who had entered my life since I'd freed myself from the past. They were individuals who saw me, truly, and who encouraged me to embrace every part of myself. Our connections were genuine, built on trust and mutual respect, and they had become a source of endless support and love. These friendships were unlike any I'd known before, and they reminded me of how vital it is to surround ourselves with people who bring light and positivity into our lives. I had also deepened my connection with the art community, using my story to inspire others who were seeking healing and self-discovery. I hosted workshops, volunteered, and traveled to share my experiences, hoping to offer others the encouragement they needed to find their own strength. Every person who approached me with their own story reminded me of the importance of sharing our journeys, of finding connection through vulnerability. My pain had not only helped me grow, but had become a bridge for others to cross into their own healing. One day, during a talk I gave at a small community center, a young woman approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. She thanked me, sharing that she had been in a similar situation and had felt trapped, powerless. But hearing my story had given her hope, the courage to believe that she too could reclaim her life. We hugged, and as she walked away, I felt a deep, abiding sense of purpose. My journey, once filled with heartache, had now become a source of strength for others. I continued to grow, to learn, to expand my life in ways that once seemed unimaginable. Each new project, each conversation, each connection reminded me that the life I had now was entirely of my own making, crafted from the pieces I had carefully reclaimed. I no longer felt bitterness or regret, only gratitude for the woman I had become and for the journey that had brought me here. In the years that followed, I built a legacy rooted in resilience and empowerment, dedicated to helping others find their way to freedom and self-worth. My story became a source of inspiration, proof that even in our darkest moments, there is always a path forward. And as I stood at the helm of the life I had built, I knew that I was ready for whatever lay ahead. I had not only survived, I had flourished. On one of those quiet evenings, as I watched another sunset fill the sky, I felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be. My journey had been long and difficult, but it had shaped me into someone unbreakable. And as the last light dipped below the horizon, I smiled, ready to embrace the limitless possibilities of tomorrow, fully, freely, and unapologetically myself.